this session, we're going to talk about phases, flight modes, and Q-links. Q-links is one of the terms that Graupner has used in the past. In the more recent firmware updates, we're calling them phases. Phases are also known as flight modes, and you can think of phases, flight modes, and Q-links as having a different set of settings for the aircraft. Flip a switch, the aircraft has one set of settings. Flip a switch, a different set of settings, and so on. How would you use phases? Well, the simplest way to define how you might use phases is looking at a simple radian glider. The radian glider, when you throttle up, if you are not trimmed correctly, tends to loop on you because it has so much lift and there's a pretty good motor in that glider. But when the glider is flying normally and trimmed out correctly, you also are circling to the right. So you got a little right rudder in there and it's trimmed out so that it's flying level without any power. Then so takeoff needs to be straight and landing needs to be straight, but cruising and thermaling, you need the glider circling a bit. So we're going to create some phases just so you can understand what that scenario is. Now phases also have a very unique property. You will have to set your dual rates, your expo. You will have to set your mixes in each phase. So if you need the same dual rates or expo or mixes in your phases, you can create your first phase, copy it to the next position, rename it, change the settings, copy to the next position, rename it, and change the settings. For this particular demonstration, we're going to make things pretty simple. We're going to set up each phase separately. Going to a simple aircraft I've already created. We're going to go to the base menu so you can see it. And the model type is 2 ailerons, 2 flaps, a glider, and normal tail. So we're going to go to function menu and to phases. Okay. Now you have a default phase, your normal phase, and then you can create new ones. So we're going to create some new ones real quick. I'm going to hit new, and it adds a place for a switch, and I'm going to change the name. So I'm going to name this first phase launch. Whoops, backspace. Let's see, where's the H? Launch. So this phase is called launch. We're going to go back. Okay. Then the next phase, I'm going to hit new, and I'm going to change its name to cruise or thermal. Okay, so I'm going to call it cruise. Change this name. And the last phase will be our landing phase. So I'll touch this one, hit new, and I will put in the name landing. Landing. So we've got 3 phases: launch, cruise, and landing. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to assign a switch to switch phases. So I'm going to touch the null here, and I'm going to use switch 1 for this demonstration. So in one position, I'm going to be there. In this one, I'm going to be there. And this one, I'm going to be here. So if we watch the top of the screen, launch, cruise, landing, we now have a switch assigned to the phases and they're ready to go. In addition to assigning a switch to a phase, you can go up here to the top. You can assign audio to the phase. So our, let's see, launch phase, go back here to set. So our launch phase, we can go ahead.
Air brake, lip mode, brake mode, attitude, snap roll right, snap roll, flaps landing, flaps approach, flaps takeoff, flaps up, gear up, teacher, student, low rate, mid rate, high rate, auto rotate, idle up 2, idle up 1, hovering, hold, 3D mode, takeoff, landing, distance, speed, thermal, launch.
There we go. And on the second one, we're going to make it cruise or something like that.
Air breakdown, air equilibrium attitude, snap, lab, gear, teach, low, mid, high rate, auto, idle up, idle, hovering, hold, 3D mode, take off, landing, distance, speed, thermal.
Now let's use thermal.
10,000, normal, launch,
let's use thermal, okay? And then on the last one, we want landing.
Lab, gear, teacher, student, low, mid, high rate, auto, idle up to, idle up, hovering, hold, 3D mode, take off, landing.
There we go. So,
thermal, landing, thermal, launch.
There we go. So we'll go back. And since I use thermal, I'm going to change the name of the cruise one to thermal. Makes more sense since that's what we're calling it. So, flipping switch 1, thermal, landing, thermal, and launch. So we've created 3 phases assigned to one switch. There is room for more phases, okay? So you can do 6 phases. Now keep in mind that phases are prior towards. Right now we don't see phase 1 because I assign assignments to launch, thermal, and landing. So we will never see phase 1 because I have used all the positions. So if you need more phases than 3, keep in mind that phases have a sequential priority. So the first phase will always have priority over a phase that's later on in the list, okay? So we now have set up phases. So let's set up some differences for those phases. Okay, so we've set up some phases. Let's go ahead and look at them. On the function menu, phases, assign them to switch 1. If I move switch 1, you can see they change. The audio files have been assigned. So now that we've created the phases, we might want to create specific settings within each phase. So let's go back. In this particular example though, this glider is fairly simple and we're going to use a different set of trims for each phase. We're not creating any special mixes or any special functions. We're just going to change how the trims function. So I'm going to go to this trim step menu on the base menu. And if you look up here in the left hand corner, SE stands for separate. If I touch it, common. So when it's common, the same trims will apply to the aircraft in all the phases. When it's separate, each phase will have a different set of trim functions. Okay? So we're going to leave it separate because that's all we're going to do for this particular demonstration. So I'm going to go back. And then we're just going to go right to the base, to the main screen. And we're going to put our switch in each of the different phases. And I hope you can see that okay. Alright. Center my radio just a little bit better for you. Okay. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to change the trims based on what's going on. So I'm going to put us into launch mode. Now in launch mode, can you see my elevator trim? Okay. Because the aircraft has so much lift and the motor has so much power, without any down elevator, the aircraft tends to balloon straight up and even pull a full loop. Okay. So we're going to start with a little bit of down elevator, say 10% here, 12%, okay? Now on our rudder, it's currently centered, but we're going to leave it that way. So we want the aircraft to fly away from us straight, okay? So simple, a little down elevator and a straight rudder to take off. Okay, now I'm going to pull the switch towards me. So once we've got the aircraft up to altitude, we'll cut back the motor, and then we're going to want to trim the aircraft for a circle to the right and to stay level. So we'll probably need a little bit of down elevator. I'm going to give it a little up elevator, excuse me. I'm going to give it about 8% there, and the rudder, I'm going to change that rudder to be about, how about 7%? And so now we've got a little up elevator and 7% for the thermal function. Pulling the switch towards me.
Landing.
I now need a little down elevator, and I need the rudder to be centered. It already is. So let's see if we can watch that. So watch these two positions on the screen as I flip the switch. So we're in landing mode, down elevator, straight rudder. We're flying around. We've got some up elevator and a right turn. And when we're landing, more down elevator and a rudder that is straight. So for this particular demonstration, all we did is set the trims to separate and assign the different trim to each of the functions.